What's going on, you guys? So Terence Crawford just set the boxing world on fire, going on Twitter, to take aim at all of his critics, all the haters out there, man. And I was very glad to see it. He touched on a lot of things that I probably may not even talk about in this video, but I'll try to, talk about some of the more important things in this whole, I guess, series of tweets that he put out there. First being the whole narrative that we had heard for years before he had got the Spence fight. And that pretty much was that Terence Crawford isn't a big draw. He doesn't sell tickets. He's not a big draw. You had Bob Arum, his own promoter, going against him at times, who he ended up suing, right? But I think when it came time for him to renew his contract, or, he was open to the idea of being a free agent and leaving Top Rank, Bob Arum went out of his way to say things like, oh, man, every time that Terence Crawford fights, I lose money, I could have bought this amount of houses in Beverly Hills with all the money I've given to Terence Crawford and all of his events, and all the things that we had heard about pay-per-view numbers and this, that, and the other, right? And what I found crazy about that whole time period was, here you have the pound-for-pound #1 guy in the sport, right? A guy who's won Fighter of the Year multiple years, who was a 3-division champion, right? Former undisputed. And people are saying he's not a draw, that he's not a superstar. And Earl Spence and Danny Garcia and Lisp, Keith Thurman, these guys are bigger draws than Terence Crawford? Like, are you serious? It made no sense to me, and it still doesn't to this day. And I think, that was one of the things that Crawford had talked about, but he probably got tired of hearing those things, and it's been years and years since those things have been discussed. But the other thing that I really enjoyed, that I probably liked the most out of all the tweets that he put out there was what he said about Manny Pacquiao, right? And just to kind of give you guys a little bit of context on this, Manny Pacquiao and Terence Crawford were, that was a fight that was talked about for years. And it started about 2015 when Crawford was at the junior welterweight division, right? And he had beat up on Deary John, who was a sparring partner of Manny Pacquiao. And they were saying, hey, if you beat Deary John, the Manny Pacquiao fight might be next for you, or it can be next for you, depending on how you look. And he goes out there and stops him and beats him, right? Dominantly. And we never got the Manny Pacquiao fight, right? And there was other discussions throughout the years, but I had just posted a YouTube short today of Bob Arum, Freddie Roach coming out there saying they don't want the Terence Crawford fight for Manny Pacquiao, that Terence Crawford would actually hurt Manny Pacquiao badly, and Bob Arum still has a soft spot for old Pac-Man in his heart, right? And Freddie Roach said that's just a difficult fight, point blank period, right? And Bob Arum quoted Manny saying, hey, man, he doesn't feel that Manny doesn't feel that he has what it takes to beat a guy like Terence Crawford with the skill set and all the things that Terence Crawford brings to the table. He doesn't feel comfortable taking that fight with the stage that he's at in his career, right? But I get so many comments on a past YouTube short I posted talking about Terence Crawford saying, oh, Manny Pacquiao is in top 5 all time for me because I think he was on steroids, pretty much, right? To keep it short. He didn't want to take random blood, urine testing, Olympic-style drug testing when it came to a Floyd Mayweather fight. That's ultimately what stopped that fight from happening initially, right? And that's all Terence Crawford was trying to say. You don't go through 8 divisions the way Manny Pacquiao did, right? And you're not taking PEDs. Like, let's just be honest. I know he's never been caught with using PEDs, but if we're going to call a spade, more than likely this dude was juicing. But there's a lot of guys in the sport of boxing that are juicing, so whatever, right? But let's not get it twisted. This dude was probably juicing, and ultimately, that's just the context. But what Terence Crawford said in his tweet today is that he would F up Manny Pacquiao. And I agree with him. I've been saying that. I think Terence Crawford, all the abilities that he has, counter-punching, he can fight going forward, fight off the back foot. He has movement laterally. He has good footwork, right? Educated feet, a good lead hand, and he's got power and speed. All those things would give Manny Pacquiao, a guy who can be defensively reckless at times, right? And just lunge in with shots, I think ultimately he would end up getting caught and stopped, right? And it doesn't matter what Manny Pacquiao, that you want to say that would compete with Terence Crawford, right? I see a lot of comments on that same video I was just talking about, right? A bunch of Manny fanboys saying, oh, Manny would destroy him in his prime, and who is Terence Crawford in comparison to Manny Pacquiao, and this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter what Manny Pacquiao, we're talking about. It could be the Pacquiao that was juiced out of his mind when he fought Miguel Cotto. That dude's getting stopped by Terence Crawford. I don't care. But I'm really glad that he addressed that, because that's been something that's talked about for, years and years. And honestly, it's something that I see on a daily basis, because I still got Manny fanboys to this day commenting on that one specific video. So I'm really glad he said that, right? And then the other thing that I wanted to touch on, in terms of, his series of tweets that he put out there, right? He said there's a lot of fighters out there that, the older guys that just hate on these young dudes, him included. And they don't want to see some of these young fighters, accomplish things that they weren't able to, right? And my mind automatically went to Floyd Mayweather, right? Floyd Mayweather's never been undisputed, let alone 2-time or 3-time undisputed, right? But for some reason, Floyd Mayweather is one of those guys, not just with Terence Crawford, but even fighters under his own promotion company, right, that have accused Mayweather of just being a straight-up hater, right? But for me, one specific example of Floyd Mayweather being a hater, right, is him Crawford trying to get the Canelo fight, right? And Floyd Mayweather came out of his way to say, oh, he should fight Benavidez instead. Bro, the only reason he's trying to fight Canelo is because, 1, Canelo's got all the belts, and 2, that's a big, huge money fight, and 3, it's a legacy fight. Canelo was considered the face of boxing, right? And this happens to be a guy that Floyd Mayweather shared the ring with. So there's potentially an opportunity for Crawford to outshine what Floyd Mayweather did against Canelo, right? And that's ultimately why I felt Floyd Mayweather said what he said. But you have longtime friend of Terence Crawford, Bernie the Boxer, saying that Mayweather's straight up a hater for saying those things, right? How come Floyd Mayweather didn't fight Paul Williams or Antonio Margarito when they were in their prime and considered elite, right? In the same weight class. How come we know he never fought those guys, right? But he's telling Bud to fight Benavidez, right? And it's not only that, Crawford got the Canelo fight. He had to move up multiple divisions to fight him, bro. He fought him at his best weight class, where he was undisputed. Floyd Mayweather got him a little young, wasn't as seasoned of a fighter as he was the day he fought, Terence Crawford. But I'm glad that he said something about that, and he had a fan come back and say, well, Terence Crawford just must think he's Floyd Mayweather and think that he's a legend with the way he's talking and stuff like that. He beat up a washed-up Spence and or a washed-up Canelo Alvarez in a car wreck, broken Spence, and Crawford simply responded saying, I am a legend, and I'm not Floyd. You're right. I'm more dangerous than Floyd. And I really like seeing that, because I agree with that as well. And it's something I've said on this channel as well too. That Floyd Mayweather, yes, he is a legend in his own right. No arguing that. But Crawford is just more dangerous, right? And if we were to compare the performances, I would say Crawford did a lot better against Canelo than Mayweather did against Canelo, right? He let his hands go more. He inflicted more punishment on Canelo than Mayweather did, and that's a fact. And every guy that he fought in the welterweight division, he stopped. When Floyd Mayweather got to the welterweight division, majority of his fights went to the decision, right? You talking about Crawford, who's 42-0 with like 31 knockouts or 32 knockouts or something like that. And Floyd Mayweather, he was 50-0 with like 26 knockouts. So, I mean, I don't know. Crawford, in my eyes, is the more dangerous fighter, and I don't really think that's a debate. He's more offensively minded. He's going to take a little bit more risk. He's going to actually try to inflict punishment on his opponent, whereas Floyd Mayweather, you could say he's going to just try to coast it and win a unanimous decision and outpoint his opponent, right? But Floyd Mayweather is a legend in his own right, but Terence Crawford said that Floyd Mayweather would be the only guy to give him any trouble, and that's just because of his mind and his IQ, right? Aside from that, he feels that nobody throughout the history of the sport, or the welterweight division, or around those weight classes would have given him any trouble at all. And I agree with that, man. I think you could put Crawford in any era and he's going to thrive, straight up. Whether it's the 80s or the 70s with, you know, some of the premier welterweights of all time. You got Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, you know, Roberto Duran, you know, those guys. Sugar Ray Robinson, I think he's right up there with all those guys. If not, he beats all of them. I mean, I think Crawford has earned, you know, the right to be considered a GOAT, if not the GOAT. Look at what he's accomplished. And something that he touched on a little bit in this series of tweets as well is like, he finds it crazy that certain individuals will come out here and say, we never really saw, you know, what Crawford was fully capable of doing because he never had anybody to, you know, pull that out of him. And he pretty much said, the only reason we never saw that is because I was stopping everybody. You look at everybody in the welterweight division, he stopped them. Completely dominant, ran through that division, right? And I agree with that, man, because it's not who he fought. Let me back up. People like to say that he didn't fight anybody, and same thing with Roy Jones goes. They're not nobodies. I just made them look like nobodies, and I think that's really what it is with Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford is a guy who beat Yuriorkis Gamboa, who's a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter at the time, undefeated. Ricky Burns was a 3-division champion. Victor Postal was elite. Straight up, he was elite. He beat Lucas Matisse, stopped him. And at that time, you know what? Victor Postal was looked at like Bakrim Murtazaliev was looked at today. That's how Victor Postal was back then. He had guys like Danny Garcia running out of the division. He was elite and very feared, and nobody really wanted to fight him. So that is a great win. I don't care what anybody says. People like to discredit, you know, Terence Crawford's accomplishments and the guys that he has on his resume. And this is kind of why I think he came out and did what he did. But there's a list of other fighters that Terence Crawford have fought that necessarily weren't as commercialized as, you know, some other guys that, you know, get credited for having great resumes, right? You could go through Floyd's resume and say the same thing. You fought Zab Judah after he lost to Carlos Baldemir. You fought Carlos Baldemir, but he really never was worth a shit anyway. Shane Mosley, past prime. Manny Pacquiao, past prime. And some of these fights, you know, Oscar De La Hoya, past prime. But some of these fights, you know, you can't really blame Floyd Mayweather for fighting them at the versions they were, because a lot of them avoided him. And they fought him when it was convenient to them. So that's one way to look at it. But you can't disregard Crawford's accomplishments, the guys on his resumes, the people he's beat. He's beat more pound-for-pound fighters than Canelo Alvarez. Active, current pound-for-pound fighters. He's beat more than Canelo Alvarez, right? But people like to say Canelo's got this just amazing resume, right? I'm not to say that he doesn't, but we're going to give credit to Canelo for having a resume, even though he got whooped by Bivol, Mayweather, and now Bud. And really, he probably lost to Lara. But we're going to say, since he fought those guys, he's just got a great resume. You don't get credit for getting your ass whooped. Straight up, bro. I don't understand why Canelo fanboys used to do that. You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. But I was really glad to see Terence Crawford, you know, come out and kind of just let loose on some of these things that have been talked about and discussed about him throughout these years. All the critics that have been out there. And this just goes to show you that, one, Terence Crawford does see all the criticism, all the hate, you know, online. He sees all those things. But he uses it to fuel. I wouldn't be surprised now if he goes out and actually tries to become a 4-time undisputed champion, just for the heck of it. And I said this in a past video. I think when it came time for like comparing Boots to Crawford, I think it was one of those videos I did some time ago. But Terence Crawford is an ultra competitor, and I said that he is Michael Jordan-esque in the sense that Michael Jordan used to see all the articles that were written about him. And then when, you know, it came time for him to play the team of, you know, in the same city of the author that, you know, published this article hating on him or whatever, critiquing him, wherever the author was from, or, whoever, wrote it, he would go out there and prove a point, try to prove them wrong. He used every bit of negative press or criticism that he got and use it as fuel to go out and perform to the highest level, right? He would sometimes even make up stories in his own head. That's how crazy, psycho competitive that Michael Jordan was. Couldn't lose at throwing the quarter against the wall. In the same sense, Terence Crawford is very similar like that. He sees all these things that are said about him. He doesn't like to lose at anything, whether it's a 3-point contest with Ryan Clark, ping pong with Shakur Stevenson, or playing video games with his team. It doesn't matter. He doesn't want to lose at anything. And I probably would say that's like some level of psychotic ultra competitiveness, but Bud is a great dude through and through. And that's another thing that, I don't understand why the hate is there. The dude is a great father. He clearly displays that. He's just a great dude. He does a lot of stuff for his community. He looks after all the young fighters on the way up, mentoring them, and just a laid back, chill dude. The guy likes to go fishing, and just hang out with his family. There's really nothing, you don't see him in no scandals or anything like that. He's loved and respected in his city. I just don't understand the hate, man, but it's a shame that we're seeing all of this, at this stage of his career, whereas we could have, gotten the best of Bud if he had gotten those opportunities earlier on, man. And it's just still a shame, but those are my thoughts, man. Let me know what you guys think of all the tweets that, Terence Crawford, put out there. And who do you think would have won in a potential, prime for prime, Floyd Mayweather versus Terence Crawford, or a Manny Pacquiao versus Terence Crawford? Let me know what you guys think. Hate, like, comment, subscribe.